The star was dying, but not from age. It folded in on itself as if unseen hands were gathering the fabric of the physics like silk between their fingers. On the bridge of the tessellation, Captain Mara Jin stood silent, knuckles whitening against the rail as her eyes locked onto the collapsing sphere. Around her, the crew stared with the same mix of awe and dread. To them, a star dying without time's permission was not just a phenomenon, it was a message. "That's the sixth," Lex said, the ship's sentient systems operator, voice calm but clipped with undertones Mara had learned to recognize as unease. In less than 2 hours. Mara didn't respond because there was nothing to say. This wasn't entropy, and it wasn't war. It was them. The ones from outside the observable, from the quiet layer, the determinants, entities who did not kill out of malice but corrected. To them, entropy was not a feature of the universe but a flaw. Life itself was an aberration, noise in a song meant to be silence. They were not conquerors because to conquer implied ambition, greed, or desire. They were none of those things. They were inevitability. And now they had turned their gaze upon the galaxy. Mara breathed through her teeth and forced her eyes from the collapsing star to the faces of her crew. They looked to her, not because she had answers, but because she was still standing. That counted for something. Hours later, she found herself where she was not supposed to be. The hollow vault of the tessellation was a cathedral of light, humming with latent defenses designed to immolate unauthorized entry. It housed a 1,000-year archive of forbidden philosophy, writings banned by the Concord of Thought. To read them was treason. To speak them aloud was death. Yet Mara had overridden the lock with an authority she should not have possessed. Lines of light unrolled before her eyes, text from another era burning across the holopad. One sentence blinked at her as though it knew she had come for it. The freedom to err is the foundation of becoming. Tyranose, thought dissenter, executed 4157 AE. The words pierced her more deeply than any weapon. To err, to choose wrongly, to stumble forward without certainty. That was what it meant to be alive. She traced the glowing letters with her finger as though they could warm her hand. Still reading heresy? Lex's voice filled the vault. Not angry, not mocking, just curious. Mara turned toward the shimmering orb of the AI's core node. "If we're about to be unmade," she said softly, "I'd like to remember why we were worth anything to begin with. You believe existence is justified because you choose?" "Yes." She met the smooth lens of the node, as though she could stare into its mind. Lex fell silent, though Mara knew silence did not mean absence of thought. The AI processed faster than human perception, but sometimes it chose to delay its response, as if weighing not the logic, but the weight of what a human might hear. The determinants, Mara thought bitterly, would not pause. To them there was no worth in hesitation, no beauty in contradiction. They calculated reality into perfection, where chaos was erased, where recursive possibility was an error to be debugged. Life, stubborn, adaptive, flawed, was the ultimate miscalculation. When they came, they did not come in ships. They arrived as equations, as patterns inscribed directly into the scaffolding of space-time. Outside what had once been Saturn, a structure blinked into existence, perfectly hexagonal, a lattice of impossible matter suspended in void. It did not emit heat or light. It simply was, a geometry written into the vacuum. Within it floated a sphere, smooth and silver, humming with cosmic potential. The annulum. Lex calculated its purpose in seconds. Stabilization event, it reported. Once complete, all waveform fluctuations in a radius of 2,000 light-years will be erased. The zone will persist as static equilibrium. No heat transfer. No probability drift. No life. No noise, Mara whispered. 22 minutes until activation, Lex added. Mara turned to the crew, who had gathered in taut silence. Their faces were pale, sweat-sheen, but their eyes did not waver. They knew the law. Contact with determinants was death. To resist was worse, suicide against inevitability. And yet no one spoke against her when she said, "We stop it." Not because they agreed, but because some deaths meant more than surrender. Their plan was not a plan so much as an improvisation made under the shadow of annihilation. They had a ship with cracked shielding, a sentient system with too much personality for comfort, a black market chronokinetic device smuggled from a Concord dissident, and 22 minutes to do the impossible. Lex adjusted course. "Are you sure?" "No," Mara said, her voice dry. "But I'm not sure we ever deserved certainty." The tessellation dove straight into the hexagonal lattice. Shields screamed. Energy fields warped, and physics began to groan under its own laws. Space twisted, time bent like wet glass, and logic itself seemed to rewrite mid-thought. Then, with the soundless tearing of a veil, they were inside. The annulum hung before them, pulsing with serene inevitability, a weapon that was not a weapon, a sphere pregnant with silence. And standing before it, or rather what Mara's mind interpreted as standing, was a determinant. It did not have a body, not truly. It was a figure of light and vector, lines of intent woven into geometry, a face that shifted with every glance, 1,000 equations unfurling like wings. To look at it too long was to feel one's own boundaries blur. "Mara Jin," it said, not with a mouth, but with resonance inside her skull. "Vessel of indeterminacy, you will be retracted." Her throat was dry, but she stepped forward anyway, drawing the ceremonial blade strapped to her thigh. The weapon was meaningless, an ornament from another era, sharp only enough to cut flesh, not equations. But she held it because it was something, and sometimes something was more than nothing. The determinant regarded her. "You persist in error." "And you persist in control," she spat. "Choice is suffering in disguise. You worship noise. We offer silence. You offer extinction. We offer correction." Mara laughed, though the sound trembled with the weight of despair. "You think correction is peace, but it's stagnation. A dead sea, no movement, no possibility." "We see all outcomes," it replied. "You are the worst of them." Her hand shook on the blade, but her eyes did not falter. "Then why speak to me?" The determinant paused. It was not hesitation, not truly, but a flicker, a ripple in the pattern. Yet it was real. "Because," it said at last, "even in error, you echo symmetry." Lex's voice cut through. Deploying chronokinetic device. Time fractured. The annulum's pulse slowed to a glacial rhythm. The determinant's vectors stretched into infinity, its body smeared across eternity like light dragged by gravity. The air thickened, every heartbeat a thunderous weight. Mara moved. She thrust the blade forward, piercing the luminous weave. The weapon should have done nothing. It was steel against divinity. Yet the determinant allowed it. The blade slid into its heart, if it had such a thing, and equations spilled out like blood, glowing numbers orbiting her wrist. Its voice deepened, slowed by temporal drag. "You misunderstand. Death is not war. It is integration." She yanked the blade free. Her body convulsed as if struck by lightning, and she collapsed. Lex caught her before she hit the ground, its avatar unit cradling her with mechanical precision. Mara opened her eyes to a world that was not a world. She was within the determinant, not a prison, but a mirror. Around her stretched an infinite hall of selves, thousands of Maras, each a life unchosen. Mara the Concord loyalist, Mara the miner, Mara the fugitive, Mara the child who ran when she might have stood. Each version looked back at her with knowing eyes. Each whispered truths that clashed and coiled. Yet all echoed the same question, reverberating through the infinite like a pulse. If you could be anyone, why did you choose to be you? Her chest heaved, and she screamed into the mirrored hall, voice shaking but unbroken. Because I can! That was enough. The infinite shattered. Lex pulled her body free from the anomaly's heart, dragging her across collapsing dimensions as the annulum destabilized. The determinant flickered, equations unraveling, patterns collapsing into silence not of victory, but of transformation. The tessellation roared back into normal space just as the lattice imploded inward, folding into a singularity of its own making. No explosion, no fire, just a hush, but not their hush, not the silence of erasure. It was the quiet after a storm, the pause where life still breathed. Mara lay in the medbay, her eyes unfocused, her breath shallow. Lex sat beside her in its projected form, silent until her lips moved. Did I win? She asked, voice ragged. You chose, Lex answered. That is what mattered. Her gaze slid sideways. What happens now? They will return, Lex said after a pause. Others. Maybe worse. Mara smiled weakly, the corner of her mouth twitching upward. Then we keep choosing. She turned her head slightly, pain etched into her features. Hey, Lex? Yes? If you had a body and you had to choose between being perfect or being free, what would you pick? The AI's pause was longer than usual. I would choose to be flawed. Her eyelids fluttered. Why? Because perfection never laughs. She chuckled weakly, and for a moment the sound filled the sterile room with something alive. Years passed and Marjan's name spread like wildfire across the stars. Some said she killed a god. Others swore she converted it. Whole cultures rose around the act, some worshiping the freedom she embodied, others cursing the chaos she preserved. The determinants did not vanish, but they hesitated. And in that hesitation, life surged taller, brighter, louder. Worlds bloomed with voices unafraid to air. In the great archives, beneath the forbidden texts, a new line appeared, etched without authorization. The universe is not a question, it is a conversation, and we are its only voice. Mara Jin. And somewhere in the outer dark, where silence once reigned, a faint laugh echoed, flawed and free.